Chapter 10 is on motivation and emotion. There are 3 modules in this chapter. Module 29 is going to explain what motivation is and what is behind our motivations. And we'll talk about some well-known researchers like Abraham Maslow, who came up with his theory of motivation. Then module 30 is going to look at the motivation behind eating and drinking and weight and things along those lines. And in the last module, module 31, that's going to look more so at understanding our emotional experiences. So let's start off with module 29. This module is explaining motivation. And there is one question that we're going to answer in this module, and then we're also going to have a few things on this slide explaining what we're going to cover in this module. So one of the questions we are going to answer is, how does motivation direct and energize our behavior? So every behavior that you perform, there is some motivation behind that behavior. Whenever we talk about what motivation is, it is the factors that direct and energize the behavior of humans and other organisms. So our non-human animals also have motivation behind what they do, whether that is to mate or to eat or to survive, right? Motivation is not just a human concept. So it includes behavioral, cognitive, and social aspects. And we study motivation with a variety of different approaches. All of those approaches, though, seek to explain the energy that guides behavior in a specific direction. So let's start off talking about our instinct approaches, how we are born to be motivated. So first off, instincts, right? I'm sure you know what an instinct is. We've talked about them numerous times in this class, such as with reflexes when we were talking about the chapter on learning. We talked about instincts way back in chapter 3 when we were talking about brain and behavior also. But an instinct is an inborn pattern of behavior of behavior that are biologically determined rather than learned. So instincts occur naturally. You don't have to learn about instincts, kind of like your reflexes, they just automatically occur. The instinct approaches to motivation, we use those as an explanation of the motivation that suggests people and animals, non-human animals, are born pre-programmed with sets of behaviors that are essential to their survival. Now, the weaknesses of this instinct approach is that it has a lack of agreement on the number of primary instincts. And what that is saying is that through research, no researcher has been able to determine this is the exact number of instincts that you have when you are born. Because anything after you're born is due to learning. Instincts are inborn. You have them the minute you're born, and there has been no, recognized result on the number of instincts that you have when you are born. A second weakness is that you are unable to explain why behaviors evolve in some species but not in others. So those are 2 of the weaknesses with this instinct approach to motivation that we have. Another approach that we have is the drive reduction approach. And this is looking at satisfying our needs. So the drive reduction approach it consists of a number of theories that suggest that there's a lack of some basic biological need that produces a drive in order to push you to satisfy that need. So your biological instinct is not there. There has to be some other reason that is driving you to fulfill that need. When we talk about what a drive is, it's this motivational tension or arousal that energizes behavior to fulfill some need. And we have both primary drives and we have secondary drives. Now, you can probably figure out what these are because we have talked about primary and secondary previously, right? So your primary drives are those that you seek out in order to survive. So the primary drives are related to biological needs of the body or of the species as a whole. Your secondary drives are the other drives that are not biological. So they do not fulfill any sort of biological need. When we talk about these drive reduction approaches, we come to what is called homeostasis. And you heard me mention homeostasis previously in another chapter. But it is our body's tendency to maintain this steady internal state. When our body gets out of whack or out of homeostasis, we perform certain behaviors to bring it back to homeostasis. Okay? Kind of like a temperature, right? You want a certain temperature in your house, and whenever it goes below that temperature, your furnace comes on to raise it back up to that temperature. So homeostasis underlies our primary drives. And it uses a feedback loop. Once it reaches that, it shuts off until it falls below again. Then it comes back on, brings it back up, shuts off, falls down again, comes back on, so on and so forth. So homeostasis operates the need for things that we need for survival, such as food and water, a stable body temperature, and sleep. If we fall below this need that we have, then homeostasis is going to kick in and we're going to be driven to perform some behavior to bring it back up to homeostasis. Now, this slide you can find in your book on the top of page 301. And as we just said, homeostasis is a series of feedback loops to regulate body functions, the same way that I explained that your furnace would to turn on your heat. Now, similarly, this is what this is showing. Similarly, when body temperature becomes too low, the blood vessels constrict and we shiver or seek warmth. When body temperatures become too high, the blood vessels expand and we sweat as a way to lower our body temperature. And so you can see this works as a feedback loop. So here on the left-hand side is the set point for heating. So you set your temperature in a room at a certain degrees. When it falls below that, your furnace kicks on and brings it back up to that certain temperature. Your body works in the same way. There is a set temperature that you have for your body in keeping it at homeostasis. So that is the drive reduction approach to motivation. The next one we have is the arousal approach. So this is now looking beyond drive reduction. When we are talking about the arousal approaches to motivation, it is the belief that people try to maintain this steady level of stimulation and activity. And as you can see, it suggests that if stimulation and activity levels become too high, we need to reduce them. If they become too low, we need to seek out ways to increase them. Because we are all individuals, we have varying levels of arousal. And so we are all going to vary in what is our optimum level of arousal to seek out. There are some people that have an especially high level of arousal, and those people would be people who take part in extreme sports. So they call them daredevil sportsmen. People who also are high stake gamblers. We're talking about thousands of dollars. And also criminals. They have a high level of arousal, and they're going to seek out behaviors or activities to reach that high level of arousal. We also have what are called incentive approaches, and this is your motivations pool. What is making you do this? What is the incentive behind it? So the incentive approach to motivation, they are theories that suggest that motivation stems from your desire to attain certain external rewards, which are known as incentives. If you fail to provide a complete explanation of motivation, as organisms sometimes seek to fulfill needs, even with no apparent incentive. There are many psychologists that believe that drives and incentives may actually work together in order to motivate behavior. That maybe it's not just drives and maybe it's not just incentives, but the drives and incentives work together. And so we look at this as a push and a pull. So the push is your internal drive proposed by the drive reduction theory. The pull is the external incentive of the incentive theory. So the push is something within you that you're doing to fulfill that drive. The pull is something external that we talk about with this incentive theory. Another approach that we have is the cognitive approach. And these are our thoughts behind motivation. So these theories suggest that motivation is a result of your thoughts and your beliefs, your expectations, and your goals. The reason why you perform some behavior is based on those beliefs or expectations or goals. And so this theory draws a key distinction between both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So let's discuss what we mean, the difference between intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. With intrinsic motivation, it's something within you that you are doing for your own self. You're not looking for any sort of outside accolade to get. So it's individuals participate in an activity for their own enjoyment rather than any sort of reward they will get for it. They're doing that for themselves, right? They're not going to get any sort of reward or accolade for doing it. They're doing it because they simply enjoy doing it. On the other hand, you have extrinsic motivation. And this is where an individual does something for some sort of reward. Either it's for money or a grade or some sort of concrete reward that they're going to do it. So look at your job that you have. Would you be happy doing your job if you never again got paid for it? If so, then you are intrinsically motivated to go to work each day. However, if you're only going to work each day because you need a paycheck, and if you stopped getting paid, you would stop doing that job, then that is some extrinsic motivation. Now, it could be both, right? Perhaps you do truly love your job, but you need to get paid, right? In order to survive. So it's not necessarily where it's always one or the other. It could be both. Now, I mentioned early on, a couple of slides ago at the beginning of this chapter, and I mentioned Abraham Maslow. Abraham Maslow is one of the leading psychologists in motivation. And so he proposed this model of motivation that places motivational needs in a certain hierarchy. That you have some lower needs and then you have some higher needs. So before you can reach those higher sophisticated needs, you need to satisfy some of the lower primary needs. And part of this is also what we call self-actualization. Self-actualization is the state of fulfillment in which you realize the highest potential in your own way. If you're self-actualized, you know what your highest potential is. And that may be completely different from what someone else may be saying. But you are self-actualized and you know what your highest potential is in its own way. So this is a picture showing Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And you can find this at the bottom of page 304 in your textbook. So with Maslow, what he said is self-actualization is at the very highest, the top of his hierarchy of needs. At the very bottom is your physiological needs. So you need to survive these bottom physiological needs before you can move up in this hierarchy. So the physiological needs are your primary drives, the need for water, food, sleep, and sex. Once you fulfill those, you can move up to the safety needs, the need that you have for a safe and secure environment. And then you move up to the next one, which is love and belongingness. This is your need to obtain and give affection. You cannot reach this love and belongingness need until you fulfill the safety and the physiological. Once you have the love and belongingness, you move up to the next one, which is your need for esteem. This is your need to develop and feel your own sense of self-worth. And then once you reach that, you've reached the ultimate top goal, which is self-actualization. You have this self-fulfillment. But you can see how this is a hierarchy because you cannot reach one unless you've reached the other. Now, I want to spend a little bit more time talking about Maslow's hierarchy and the ordering of these motivational needs. There are various reasons why we as psychologists have determined why Maslow's hierarchy of needs is so important. One is that it highlights the complexity of human needs. Two, it emphasizes that until your basic biological needs are met, you can't even think about those upper needs. You have to find the basic needs first and fulfill them. The third reason is that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this actually brought about other approaches to motivation, including what is called the self-determination theory. This self-determination theory is the idea that people have three basic needs: competence, autonomy, and relatedness. You have to feel competent in what you're doing. You have to feel autonomous, meaning that you are your own person, and then relatedness, that you feel as though you're also part of something else. So even though we as psychologists, we strongly believe in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we have not been able to validate the specific order of Maslow's hierarchy. We realize that they are all important, but are they in the correct order? Now, this last slide is in your book, and this is at the top of page 306. It looks a little bit different in your book because it has pictures that go along with it. But it is a table, this here is a table that breaks down all those different approaches to motivation that we just spent time talking about, and in the description of each one. So this takes everything we just talked about in the previous slides and puts it into this really nice table. So you have your instinct approach, your drive reduction, your arousal, your incentive, your cognitive, and your hierarchy of needs.